I'm your host, Greg Hodgkinson. If you're new to the show, this is episode 2 in our third series. So keep an eye on your series calendar, as every month we'll be hosting different technology experts who are leaders in their fields. They'll share their passion and what they see being the future of hot technologies in data, AI, cloud, and so much more. Your voice is an important part of the show, so submit your questions at any time in the live chats, either just to the right or below the video feed, and don't forget to stick around towards the end for the Q&A. All right, so let's meet our guests. Firstly, we have Dan, who is CEO at PainScript, an exciting telehealth startup where he has demonstrated his passion for improving patient treatment for substance abuse. And next we have Rajiv, who's our engineering lead for digital products at Prolifics, where Rajiv, I hope you don't mind me sharing that you have a very well-respected, you are very well-respected for your strong track record of successful delivery. So a very warm welcome to the Innovation Sandbox to the two of you.
Thank you, Greg. Look forward to being here.
Thank you, Greg. Great to be here.
Excellent, gents. Well, yeah, great having you, both of you, in the Sandbox today with us. So firstly, Dan, I'm going to start with you. I know you've got a very exciting story to tell about PainScript and the work that we've done with you in starting up a brand new company. But before we get there, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how it ended up bringing you to PainScript? I'm sure that's a little question that could have a big answer, but maybe if you could just give us a bit of that background.
Well, thank you, Greg, and I appreciate being here with you this morning. Like a lot of folks, my career took a curveball. My formal training is in foreign policy. I'm an expert on the Middle East, and I spent a large amount of time in Washington, D.C., focusing on the Arab-Israeli conflict, and well known in Congress for doing that work. But around 25 years ago, as I left parts of foreign policy, I started to focus on crisis management. And about half my book of business was healthcare companies. So it became a symbol that healthcare for the last 25 years has been in crisis. And my focus started to go into two areas in drug development and device development, medical devices. That drug development focused primarily on opioids, making tamper-resistant abuse deterrence products, and I've played a role in 11 of the 14 FDA-approved products for that category, as well as medical devices for bariatrics and aesthetic medicine. Both of those pathways figured into how I ended up at PainScript today. I failed at retirement after approving a drug in 2018. My pickleball game got in great shape. My handicap dropped, but after 6 months, I was bored. And an opportunity came along to join PainScript. That was a very early stage startup, really very little more than an idea. And that got me to the point where we're at today.
And having worked with you over the last, year and a bit, I can't imagine you sitting on the couch enjoying your retirement, or even just sitting on the golf course. I mean, you've got a lot more to contribute in this space, and it's been great working with you on the solution. So, if you could maybe, our audience is obviously going to be new to PainScript. Can you tell us, in short, what the mission is of PainScript, and what is the difference that PainScript seeks to make in the world?
Well, in my roles in healthcare, and not just with drug and device development, I'm completing 15 years on the board of a major mid-Atlantic hospital system, where I'm the board chair for the National Rehabilitation Hospital in Washington, D.C. And one of the things that I've learned over that period of time is the challenge for treatment of chronic patients. Chronic patients, as opposed to acute, means that you've got a long-term disability that you're going to be treated for the rest of your life. And the two challenges in chronic care management for patients, for physicians, and for the payers that pay for those services is adherence to a patient's care plan and compliance with a medication regime. In short, people aren't. And if you can make them more compliant, they will have better health outcomes. When you think about it, I just like to have a little example to explain what we mean. If you take a look at your calendar, it's Tuesday morning that we're doing this show. And if you see that on Saturday morning, you're going to go see your dentist for your biannual teeth cleaning, if you're like most Americans, the first thing you're going to do tonight when you go home is start flossing your teeth for the first time. You will continue to floss your teeth throughout the week when you get to see your dentist. The reason is you want to say to her when she asks, have you been flossing? Yes, of course. She knows you're not telling the truth. You know you're not quite telling the truth, but it is a chronic care regimen that benefits good oral health, and you'll be good at it for about a week, and then next week at this time you'll fall off without something to prompt you to continue to do what is best for your health outcome. And in a nutshell, that's what we're trying to do at PainScript. Improve outcomes by having patients, chronic care patients, be more compliant with their treatment protocols, whether it's their care plan or their medication.
So, I mean, okay, as it's flossing, we know it can make a very real difference. And although the stakes are much higher, obviously, you gave the background of substance abuse, and you spoke about your experience in, I guess, addressing crises. So that being a really large crisis with opioid abuse in the US. So the stakes when a patient's undergoing treatment, the stakes if they're not adhering to their treatment plan are much higher. And I guess it's a very real difference you can make. We'll talk about that in a moment. Essentially, the solution, though, that you've come up with, and the very innovative solution, it's a software product. So maybe just for everyone listening, can you just give us a brief outline of what the software product does and how it fits into to that problem you've just spoken about?
Well, I appreciate that, Greg, because there's really two new words in healthcare that have occurred over the last 2 to 3 years, and that's telehealth and telemedicine. Telemedicine, in very simple terms, is when you visit your physician like we are today, over a telepathic device, using Zoom, using Skype, and you have your appointment. Telehealth is what happens in between the appointments. Now, COVID was bad for the world. As a pandemic, we were woefully unprepared for it, and it caused a lot of damage in a lot of industries. However, the telehealth and telemedicine industry, COVID was a blessing because we created 10 years worth of development over the last 18 months as an industry. It gave us opportunities to reach out to patients and touch them. In our application, what we're doing is we're reaching out, touching patients. Their physician is talking to them every day over their smartphone. One of the things every physician in the world and every medical school learns in the first 30 days is the concept of psychological touching. And in its very simple term, the more often you touch a patient, the better their outcome is going to be. So our patients receive communications from their physician every day. The 8 in the morning with a good morning, Greg. It's 8 in the morning, time to take your 3 milligrams of widget, make sure there's something in your stomach when you take it, and answer today's clinical questions. We have clinical interrogations, just 3 of them every day, that provide actionable information for the physician to evaluate over time. In the United States, pain management patients, those that are on controlled substances, those that are taking opioids to manage their pain, have to see their physician face-to-face every 30 days to get their script renewed. Now, it can be by a telemedicine visit, particularly during COVID, but they still have to see their patient every 30 days. Now, think when you go see your physician, you get your 10 minutes, which is the average appointment time that a physician will spend with a patient. And the first question they're going to ask you is, how you doing? And you're going to respond with one of 2 things. The old world. The old world, it was the last 48 hours or the acute event that brought you into the office that morning. But you don't have a full picture. What we provide is a full picture of the last 30 days. How often you've gone to work? What is your fatigue and sleep adherence? Your medication adherence? What levels of pain do you have? What levels of craving do you have? Giving the physician a deeper dive and more actionable intelligence on their patient. And when you're dealing with powerful scheduled substances, this information is critical to make sure that we continue to treat the patient effectively for their pain and avoid issues that can come from inappropriate taking too much drug or as well as too little.
And if I could just pick up on that point, Dan, so I mean, I think for everyone to understand, the key thing is you're not replacing that patient's doctor or the physician-patient interaction. If anything, you're increasing the value of that interaction, because essentially for the 29 days, or 29, 30 days that the physician's not seeing the patients, you now have a detailed view on how that patient's been doing, at least in terms of taking part in the treatments. That's going to be at the doctor's fingertips. It'll make that 10 minutes with the patient that much more effective. But also, it'll means that the doctor or the physician can figure out whether they need to intervene in between visits as well, I guess. So that's part of the solution?
That is part of the solution. We have early warning scenarios in our clinical questionings. There are normative ranges set in the background. What do I mean by that? If you answer a question related, for example, to the 0 to 10 pain scale, which is 0 means no pain at all, and 10 means the most excruciating pain you can imagine, first off, that's a very subjective scale. The physician needs to know if you're a very tough individual that doesn't admit to pain, or everything is very painful to you, and how to calibrate it. So in the background, the physician may set a normative level, what he expects you to say, based on whether you're a tough guy or a bit of a pain wimp, at 5, 6, or 7. And when you answer the question, if you're someone that is very tough and never admits to pain, and the normative range is a 5 and you go down to 6, that's going to get the physician's interest. Why is Greg in so much pain? On the other hand, if Greg's a bit of a pain wimp, we may put in the background a 7. So when you write down 6, that just means it's Tuesday. It's normative. It's what we expect. And being able to get early warnings through our application when an acute event is beginning to occur not only provides better patient care, but it also saves the healthcare system money, because we know when a patient needs to be intervened in between appointments. We have had numerous anecdotal evidence in our substance use disorder patients, as well as our pain management patients, the physician seeing something that is quite disturbing, that was 2 to 3 weeks in advance of their next scheduled appointment, and the practice has reached out and intervened at a very early stage, which has prevented the patient from having a bad outcome, and it prevents the healthcare system from having a bad outcome.
Now, so I want to bring Rajiv in a moment, because it sounds like this is a very different kind of app that you've built. I mean, we're not talking a social media app. We're not talking any of the number of other kinds of apps that folks will have on their phone. This app has very specific needs and needs to engage with patients in a very certain way. So I want to pick up Rajiv's thoughts on how we've approached that in a second. But just picking up on what you just said, Dan, again, for those patients, they get 10 minutes with a doctor. They may struggle sometimes, given the treatment that they're under, to put into words how they felt throughout that month. I mean, it's, how do you catch up on a whole month with a behavior where they're going to be most focused on, the day before they get in or the week before they get in. But really, this is a huge amount of additional data for the physician as the patient, or before the patient even arrives. But when that patient's in there for that 10 minutes, the amount of value that the physician can get out of that seems to be massively increased.
I agree with that, Greg, and that's the approach. And perhaps the more important thing to say, this is a physician app, not a patient app. It's the physician communicating to the patient. We don't have patients as customers. We have physicians as customers. So you're talking to your doctor every day. Not only do you get the reminder to take medication if you have a medication program, not only do you have the 3 clinical questions that our clinical trials suggested was the optimum number for engagement, there's also always a 4th category, which is a free data box. So the patient can tell the physician anything that is relevant to it. I've run out of drugs and I need a refill. I've got a new pain that's radiating across my shoulder. Something is sharp as opposed to dull. I'm going on vacation in 2 weeks, and what do I need to be aware of? That type of information, some of which will be handled by the physician, other aspects will be handled by the physician staff, all amount to better patient care. And the beauty of the system is we collect all of the data in an anonymized, HIPAA-compliant fashion. so that we can provide physicians, both from their practice group and from their colleagues around the country, clinical data based on demographics, age, sex, weight, ICD-11 diagnostic codes, comorbid diagnoses, medications and comorbid medications, all with the idea of using machine learning initially, and maybe someday even getting to AI. Now, I know artificial intelligence is the buzzword of the day, and most all of it really is machine learning. That machine learning can give us ideas about outcomes and how to, across different age groups, find 50 to 60-year-old males that weigh between 75 and 92 kilos with pain management ICD primary diagnosis and diabetes secondary diagnosis. What differences in their treatment patterns can we find better outcomes for these patients? So there is a long-term benefit as well as the individual patient benefit that we're looking at.
So this is more than just an app. Okay, definitely more than just an app. So an app
it's more than
on
just
a patient's
pain.
phone.
Right, and it's more than just pain. It's more than just substance use disorder. We'll be launching a vertical in the very near future for bariatrics. But any chronic condition that requires care plan adherence and medication compliance can be adapted to our application. What Rajiv and his team have built for us is the ability to substitute out clinical questions that fit the profile of what the patient's needs are and provide adaptive data the physician to make the best possible diagnosis and treatment plan.
So again, I'd love to jump into some of those future plans in a moment, but I'm going to bring Rajiv in now. So Rajiv, Dan came to us. Dan had I'll say a pretty well-developed idea. I mean, Dan, you put a lot of thought into this. You and your colleagues had really not only researched this area, but you really knew the effects and the outcomes you wanted to achieve, and you had a very clear understanding as to how to achieve that value. Somehow we had to take that idea and turn it into, again, not just an application, because the application is part of it, the app on a phone, but also the component that for the doctors, the physicians, and also this had to be built in a way where, again, it's not just a simple social media app. It needs to be engaging, but the kinds of users are in a very, a specific kind of headspace. They're going through a treatment plan. That they may have all kinds of things going on in their lives. And what we didn't want to do was put an app out there which was very administratively focused and hard to engage with, and actually made their lives more difficult. I mean, we wanted to make a difference and make it easy to use, but at the same time have the rich data set being collected. So there were a lot of functional and non-functional requirements that had to be taken, again, from an idea and turned into something real. So with that in mind, Rajiv, can you tell us a bit about, you've been involved since the beginning, all the way from day one with Dan. Can you tell us a bit about how maybe some of the innovative ways we've approached the solution and creating this solution with Dan?
Yeah, right. So mostly you said it. I still remember the day Dan approached us. He had a brilliant business idea in mind. All he was looking for a reliable IT partner who can help convert his idea to reality. I often use an analogy, right? For a good movie, it's always good to have a nice script, but equally important is to have a vital thing is the screenplay, which your end users, your audiences see, feel, and experience. So we, the Prolifics, were embarked with this responsibility to design the screenplay or productize this solution. We followed a lot of innovative approaches to start with. We started with, working prototypes of functional decisions and processes, which went through an iterative review process with PaintScript team. We jotted down key architectural decisions. We also planned right sizing and topology for the 2B architecture. We embraced Agile from day one. And as soon as we were able to map Dan's mind to a decent level, next important step was to determine which features and functionalities should be part of MVP for sure, and which can be parked as backlog for future phases and iterations. So with MVP date as in mind, we planned backwards with our sprints and iterations. Each sprint used to follow with a detailed show and tell session with the PaintScript team, and constructive feedbacks were collected at that time. So this way the journey started, and eventually we landed up with a successful MVP. it has been a roller coaster ride since then. The product had matured a lot. We have introduced tons of features and functionalities to it. And yes, the screenplay is loved by business as well as end users now.
So I love an analogy. I mean, again, Dan, I can see that making sense. Your script that you had, depending who you took it to actually execute it and turn it into something real, was either going to be massively successful or it was going to be a box office failure. And, I won't put words in your mouth. Maybe I'll let you comment on how much of a massive success it's been, which I believe it has been. But maybe based on what Rajiv said, that notion of being able to get something out quickly, for you to be able to work with a partner that didn't make you wait for 3 months before you could actually start seeing something and giving feedback on something. How important was that to you to get this product and this company off the ground?
Oh, by definition, it's critical. For any early stage company, any startup, you have two issues that are working against you from the beginning and will continue for months, and that's time and money. You don't have enough of either. And the longer you wait, particularly in the tech space, the worse off you are. Now, I'm not a tech person like Rajiv or anyone that's between the age of 15 and 30. I come to it late in life and work to try and modify it. But there's some things that I know. I know financial markets, and I know the state of where companies go through. So when Rajiv and I first met, we had an idea. We had clinical trials to validate our idea. We had run 9 different clinical trials, 8 of which were co-funded and co-run with the National Institutes of Health and the National Institutes of Mental Health. So we knew we had good data, we knew we had a good idea, and we knew what the benefit of what we were doing. What we didn't have was a product. And to raise money on an idea is very hard. But you move to the next level to get an MVP, minimally viable product, which is what Rajiv first was able to do for us. And for better or worse, and my IT team, I'm sure will say for worse, it was Rajiv taking my ideas and turning it into an MVP. But that brought us to another level in the financing game. And he did it very quickly. So he saved me time, and time very definitely in startups is money. And having that initial MVP allowed us to move to the next stage of our development, where we eventually went into beta test of an operational app. And one of the things that I've learned, which is very different from drug and device development, you don't go to market until you have a product that is perfect. By perfect, it means the FDA has approved it and you can put it inside a human body. And there is no risk of any failure. In software, it's entirely different. As soon as you have something that is viable, you have to go to market because it's your customers are going to tell you how to improvise and improve. And while we started with a launch in less than a year, about 11 months from when Rajiv and I met, we had a product that took us down the right path. But that product last September is very different from the product that we have today. Conceptually, it's still the same. But we've continually improved based on customer feedback, based on user experience, based on ease of use, based on what our patients want. The patients aren't technically our customer, they still are critical, because if the app doesn't work for them, if they have to spend more than 15 or 20 seconds every day interacting with it, they're going to start to drop off. If the physician screen doesn't provide with a quick glance the information that they need to see, if they have to spend time with it, a large amount of time, they're not going to do it because their days are too highly scheduled. So every step of the way is to find that user experience on how we can interact with our customers, with their patients in a more efficient fashion. And the tech team continually drills down on that. We say, this is the problem, and they come up with a solution in 2-week spurts.
Now, even once that MVP was pushed out, I mean, so when the MVP was out there, you started getting feedback from real customers, beta testing real customers, and that is the best kind of feedback. But actually, even early on throughout that MVP development, and even within the first month or so, you went from having an idea to actually having some software that was working, that was starting to implement parts of that idea, and you could give feedback on immediately. So I'm guessing even then, throughout those initial months, the product changed a lot because you were able to firstly figure out what worked and what didn't work, and fine tune the things that didn't work as well, but also where to really focus the functionality to get the most benefit. Because you could see it working, and there's a difference between having an idea versus actually getting to download something and interact with it and starting to work out. And you've brought two things I guess. You've got the keen business sense, but also you have a very keen appreciation for what's going to work with both the physicians and the patients. So be able to take that insight and then use it to fine tune, so that when we did launch MVP, it was good to go. You definitely get feedback and improve, but it was minimally viable.
Yeah. By the same token, though, you're very kind in the sense of saying that we know. Well, we actually didn't know. We had ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know how a doctor's office runs because I've done that, and I've interacted with those physicians. But how a technology device interacts with that workflow is a bit different. And so we started with a logical point A to point B, expanding on the physician's office workflow, but it turned out not to be as efficient as the physicians wanted. Very workable, but still putting it in their hands and having them play with it, having patients in a beta mode not only respond to it, but allowing us to ask them questions about what they liked and didn't like. And you started to get themes. Taking the themes back to the team, they were able to soften the sharp corners. In some cases, it was a rewrite of different areas saying, this is the way it works when you have a patient face-to-face. Now we have a patient that is face-to-phone. That's a very different environment. So how do we optimize? And that's what we're doing now. We're continuing to optimize our approach so that it becomes a real valuable tool in treatment of a patient.
So Dan, I know we're running out of time. I've just got the signal. I think this is going to be a part one because there's so much that we didn't even get a chance to talk about. And we'd love to check in with you because, again, you've got a roadmap and a journey to take this to new areas, and that's going to be exciting to discuss as well. But what I have to do now is say thank you to you both. What we're going to do is we're going to bring in the voice of our audience. So we're not quite closing. We're going to move to take a few questions from the audience. So as a reminder to the audience, submit your questions in the live chat. That'll be in the bottom on the right of the video feed, and my producer will hand them over. But I'm going to move to picking up one of those questions now. So first one I started is, Dan, I think this is to you. Does the app follow insurance payment guidelines? You mentioned HIPAA. So the HIPAA guidelines, there's a lot of adherence.
Well, HIPAA is a guideline about privacy. So we make sure all the privacy guidelines are met, and it's very strict guidelines. So the app is completely HIPAA compliant. Now, the other side of the real world is your healthcare is a business. Physicians are running a small business or a large business, depending on size, and they need to get paid for the work that they do. So when a physician decides that our app rises to the level of medical necessity, when the care plan adherence or medication compliance is going to benefit the patient and their care plan, they are able to make a decision to bill under CPT codes that currently exist for their services. There are three types of CPT codes that we are closely aligned with that were developed for telehealth. One is digital evaluation and management, or digital E&M. That's what physicians in our pain management space typically bill for. And that is a function of how much time they spend replying to questions and data that's delivered from their patients. And there's different levels of payment for that. For our bariatric launch, for patients with morbid obesity, whether they're under a bariatric surgeon or under a bariatric physician, they will probably use a set of CPT codes called remote patient monitoring. In this case, our application allows for a Bluetooth-enabled, FDA-approved device to independently collect data from the patient, as well as time in evaluation and management of the patient. So, for example, you could imagine that one patient, a physician may want a scale to report their weight. For another, a glucose monitor as a substitute for movement. Those types of information are available on the app. Lastly, there's a third set of CPT codes we're also closely aligned with that are called remote therapeutic monitoring. In this case, the patient is able to self-report data, and this goes to professionals that are licensed who are not allowed to bill for digital evaluation and management codes. In all three cases, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, has tried to provide a pathway for telehealth applications as a mechanism to improve care and save the system money. These codes are well funded. Both Medicare and most commercial payers and several Medicaid jurisdictions are all providing a reimbursement for these services. And again, where we started is where we end, is that COVID created a lot of opportunities for people to rethink the delivery of healthcare in a more efficient fashion that leads to better outcomes. And the PainScript application is part of that journey.
And you know, the more we talk about it, and every time we talk about it, I get a more of an appreciation for really what you all are doing. I mean, when you say improving efficiency, that's a massive understatement. I mean, given the story you told us about earlier, which is you see your doctor once a month, and you've kind of got to cram all of this discussion into that 10 minutes, and there's very little interaction apart from that. I mean, the amount of improvement in efficiency is massive. But the other thing just I took from your answer there is, again, reminding me that this is not an app. It is an app. There's an app that's part of it, but it's really a service the doctor is providing that he wasn't able to provide, they weren't able to provide previously. It's a new kind of service that they're able to provide, massively more efficient than what had come before. But you know, that's the real difference here. It's a whole new way of them looking after their patients, being able to be much more productive, and have a better quality of interaction service that they can add to their patients.
And if you'll allow me just 30 seconds to tell a brief story, I think it illustrates it very well. And this occurred during the beta test of the device. So we didn't rotate questions at that point. We were just trying to develop user experience, and we had a standard set of questions. In this case, one of the questions was the 0 to 10 craving scale, how much of a craving that you're having for a substance use disorder patient. And a patient was put on the beta test, and for the first 4 days of the week, his craving numbers were a 1 or a 2 on the 0 to 10 scale, meaning low level of craving. Everything was fine. On the last day of the week, his craving scale went up to a 9. It alarmed the staff. They called his caregiver. Now, this patient had been 7 years sober. Apparently, his best friend had been in an auto accident. He was in the background screaming that he was going to go out and get blasted. He was very distraught. The psychiatrist was brought in on the phone, was able to talk him down. They had an appointment the next morning. The patient's best friend fortunately didn't die in the accident. That helped. What happened is he was able to get treated. He was able to maintain his sobriety, and at the cost to the system of an appointment with his psychiatrist. Now that's a $300-400 fee. Had that intervention not happened, the next time the patient was scheduled to see his psychiatrist for his regular session was 3.5 weeks in the future. Had there not been the early warning, the patient quite likely would have gone out and broken sobriety that night, gone out, in his words, and gotten blasted. Could have ended up in one of the emergency rooms in my hospital system and had to spend a day or two there, which would have been a $20,000 or $25,000 bill. to the healthcare system. All of that because of intervention and early warning, the ability to change an outcome is what we pride ourselves on. Not every example is that dramatic, but it happening in the early days of the testing period was remarkable.
It is, and you just scratched the surface again from what your answer to that question. The other thing I took out of that was, and again, this is a new service that doctors are offering, and this is different to, I mean, on my phone, I've got apps that can track when I go to gym, how I do in the gym. There's all kinds of data that is collected, but this is more than that. This is coupling that data collection along with the interaction with a doctor. So it's a very, very specific end-to-end service. Again, it's weaving in the software part with the service the doctor's offering, and it's something different to what they've been able to offer in the past. And we're going to, and it's bringing those,
And it's still keeping you directly involved with your physician. This is not sharing data with the rest of the world. This is just you and your doctor. Yeah. You're sharing with her what your healthcare situation is, which is what you want in the first place.
Yeah. Well, we definitely need a part 2 on this. What I'm going to do now, though, is say that that's unfortunately all the time we have for this week. So to my guests, Dan, Rajiv. Dan, loved the story. Rajiv, I almost feel we didn't get enough time with you to tell yours, but I loved the bit that you were able to share with us. And I'm very glad that we're jointly having the opportunity to improve the lives of patients out there, of substance abuse patients in this case. And you gave us a sneak peek there, Dan. There's going to be other kinds of patients and other services in future. So very much excited about the more good that we can do as new doctors and patients come on board with PainScript. So I will turn to my audience and say thank you very much for joining us. It's great having you in the Sandbox again with us. Keep an eye on our Innovation Sandbox calendar for the next episode in our series. Until then, keep well, keep innovating, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.